Que hola familia. Roughly translated, that means what's up, fam? My name is Juan Martinez. Hashtag AgriHoods. That's trending right now. You guys might want to check that out. Please do follow along on Twitter. If you have any questions for me after this or want to have a conversation afterwards, we can do that via the new thing called social media. So definitely encourage you all to do that. I'm going to be joining you, unfortunately, for a short amount of time here, and want to make sure that I connect as much as I can with all the good people and all the good work that you are doing. I'm going to be talking about a couple of things. First, legacy, communication, engagement, and empowerment. And I think those are some of the things and resonating terms that you've been hearing and talking about. And part of that is built into my story because of who I am and how my conservation and land ethics started. So I really want to make sure that comes across. I want to thank the staff of the New Jersey Conservation Foundation. Thank you for extending the invite and bringing me out to New Jersey. I woke up this morning and had to get into New Jersey nature. So I headed down to Washington Crossing State Park. It is a beautiful state. And so it is I am at fault for not taking advantage of the trek when I used to live in D.C. and had meetings in New York. I want to thank you all, and I also want to extend a thanks to the staff of the hotel. I used to work catering and hotel industry, and I was one of the people that's serving you food today, so please never forget to thank them. And remember that that's the consistency that you're trying to reach as well. So those of you under the age of 35, raise your hand. All right. We are the Millennial Generation. And within that, you're going to find a new generation that's brewing, and they're debating the name right now, whether that's the thumb generation, because of thumbs, or the selfie generation. Those are some working terms right now. Don't take my word for it. But within the Millennial Generation, you find the most diverse generation. You find the most educated generation. You find the generation most highly seeking change with less regards to membership and affiliation of which groups they belong to. It's also a generation that's been giving a stern warning by the U.S. Surgeon General that if we do not curb our habits, we will be the first generation to successfully reduce life expectancy. We're a generation that grew up until recently with war, constantly, on TV, in the newspapers. But we're also a generation that stood up and said it's time for change, and regardless of your political affiliations and who you are today, we were able to put in the White House the first president of color. That's the Millennial Generation. But, so those of you between the ages of 35 and 45, 50-ish, let's say 50, 35 and 50, raise your hand. All right. You are the generation that gave us Earth Day. You are the generation that stood up and said, let's have a call to action that brings people together, that goes beyond just affiliation and groups and skin color, and worry about the one home we have collectively together. That is your generation. Now, those of you over the age of 50, raise your hand. All right. It's a good representation there. All right, we're seeing a pattern here. But I really want to extend that sense of gratitude to your generation. Because when we talk about legacy and the fact that I, as a Latino male, born in Mexico City, immigrated to LA, can stand in this podium and talk about the conservation legacy that you helped create, that is an attribution to your generation. Your generation fought simultaneously, took a collective stand, and said, we will pass the Wilderness Act in 1964, and we will pass the Civil Rights Act. So thank you. The fact that we're talking about a legacy to be built forward for the next 20 years on 20 years that's been built already. In 1996, I looked up the numbers. In 1996, 3,891,494 babies were born. In 1996. Out of that number, 6% of those were born in the state of New Jersey, which roughly translates to about 17,332 babies born in New Jersey. 17,332 babies, children that have grown up the last 20 years, reaping the benefits of a 20-year legacy built by the New Jersey Conservation Foundation. Now, as we start to talk about the next 20 years, and we'll talk a little bit more about this as we get along, but that's going to be a theme here, the next 20, the next 50, the next 100. What do those look like? But I'll take you on a quick journey. This oftentimes looks like a faraway place in a faraway land in a war zone. This was my hood. This is South Central LA during the LA riots. I was 6 when this happened. And I remember looking outside of my window and thinking to myself, this is it. This is it. At 6 years old, thinking to myself that this is it. There's something that happens when your community burns down. When the place you play in and the people that you call friends and family have to lock themselves in or turn into other people that you've never seen before and get out there in the streets in anger. There's a conversation that still continues from that Rodney King beating. And it's present here today in New Jersey and throughout the United States because all Black lives matter. In my lifetime, I've stared down the barrel of a gun 3 times. And there's something that happens when you see that. You see instant moments. And this is the moment that I went to on one of those times. The garden in the back of my parents' house. My parents struggled and fought for us. And they wanted to give us a good life. And they always said education is the most powerful tool you would build. And as we were moving around in the city of LA, seeking a better life, the one thing that always was with us was this legacy of growing our food. So in the back of any apartment, in the house, in the ceiling, and wherever we could find it, we would grow plants. My mom would grow chamomile tea, aloe vera, beans, whatever she could grow, she would grow it. And when times got rough, this is what we would eat. Or when we got sick, this is the garden she would seek out. That's my dad and my niece now in that same garden. And I took it for granted that this was a chore that I had to go out every weekend and water this garden. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know this conservation culture that was being passed on to me. And although they kept on saying, get your education, stay in school, be good, when I stepped out of that door, what I saw was gangs. And I began to admire the gangs, not because of the glitz and glamour, but because they were the ones putting food on the table, money in their mother's pocket, and protecting their family. And for me at that age, it made sense. So I decided that I was going to do that. I was going to sacrifice my life, recognizing that I could get shot or end up in jail, but that was going to be fine. Because I know what it means to make $3,000 in a day the wrong way, and I know what it means to do it in the right way now. But this is the culture that I grew up in. And so at the age of 15, I ended up in detention. And in detention, they gave me an ultimatum. They said, either you stay in detention or you go to this thing called Eco Club. Now, for many of you, that might have been an easy choice. But remember who I'm trying to be this. You're like, I'm bald-headed, and you'll see some pictures here of that soon. I'm bald-headed, Dickie shorts, like the full regalia of the Cholo culture in LA. Now, Eco Club didn't quite mess with my rep. But I decided to go ahead for it. Why not? My dad, I knew how to grow stuff. I knew how to water a plant. And so I ended up in Dorsey High School, which happens to be the rival of Crenshaw High School. And Crenshaw and Dorsey High School are not your typical rival high schools because they are the birthplace of the Bloods and the Crips. And so in this garden, two teachers got together and decided to grow gardens in both of these places and do an exchange with both of those gardens. And that's the program that I was a part of. And in this garden, I decided I wanted to grow jalapenos. Because I like jalapenos, and who doesn't like a good salsa or guacamole? But I decided that I was going to grow the jalapenos, and I was going to pour my heart and soul into these jalapenos because I wanted to do one thing right. I was being such a messed up kid to my family, to my parents, that I wanted to do this one thing right. So I came every day after school to take care of these jalapenos. And what I didn't realize is that I got tricked. Because then I started to worry about photosynthesis. Then I started to worry about the pH balance and the soil irrigation systems of ancient civilizations. And then I started opening books, and it was applied science. And it made sense to me. And then something happened. My grades started getting better. I started to click. I ended up getting an offer to applying for a scholarship. My science teacher put a paper in front of me. And let me stress that the way we see this is an opportunity, is one opportunity. Collectively, we offer opportunities to communities and people and ourselves. And there is nothing as powerful as an opportunity in this life. That's all you get, opportunities. It's up to you whether you take them or not. So I got an opportunity to apply for the scholarship, and my science teacher advocated for it, but I was skeptical of it because it was in a state called Wyoming. I had to leave home for 2 weeks. But the way I sold it to my parents wasn't, I'm going to camp. I'm going to science camp, Teton Science School. The way I sold it to my parents was I got a scholarship based on science merit. And because of their pursuit of education, they allowed me to go. And so I ended up in Wyoming. And for me, if you've never been, how many of you have been to Grand Teton National Park here? Raise your hand. All right. Those of you that have not been there, we're going to get there, all right? We'll make sure of that. But I ended up in Grand Teton National Park, and when you think about mountains and ranges and rivers, and this is utopia to me, it became this place that all of a sudden I looked up to the sky and I saw more stars than I ever counted in my life. I couldn't count the stars. I saw a free-flowing river for the first time. And upon that, I also had a couple other opportunities. I had my own bed for the first time, my own pillow for the first time. I had a good night's sleep without helicopters or sirens outside of my door. And yes, I learned about plate tectonics and soil irrigation process and different systems of biophilia and the migration pattern of the great American bison. But something happened. I fell in love with this place. And I started to connect the dots between places like this and my little garden in South Central LA. That the connection between those two is the connection of love for yourself, for your family, for your community. So there I go, seeking out every opportunity I can to bring that message back. Tracking the great American bison through the plains of Grand Teton and Yellowstone and getting published in Scientific Journal for the first time with another group of scientists. Working with the then mayor of LA, Villaraigosa, to commit to planting 1 million trees in the city of LA. Taking an expedition of kids from Carson High School, highly polluted high school and Samoan community and Latino community in the city of LA that's suffering the effects of the Wilmington Port. I'm taking them out to the water on the Captain Jack, another expedition, another partner, colleagues expedition, but getting them on submarines to study the great white shark off the California coast. And so along comes knocking some group, and you might know them, and they say, we've recognized your work and we want to name you a National Geographic Explorer. And I had to question that because I'm not a scientist. My pure drive in life is to connect people with the outdoors and nature. There's no extensive study or knowledge that's accredited to my name. I don't write books. I'm the action guy. I get it done. They said, that's why we want you, because while research is the compass, action is the tangible. Crazy expeditions that I get to go on, right? So in 2011, I got named a National Geographic Explorer. And it came along with this new age of exploration that National Geographic is going into in the next 100 years. They've set up themselves to be a new generation, a new age of exploration, a new age of explorers that look more like the demographics of the world, that touch closer to home, that deal with the science that's going to impact the next 20, 50, 100 years of our evolution as a human society. So quick little treat.
In 1888, a club was formed with a mission to explore. Today, that spirit lives on in a new generation of National Geographic explorers. Innovative thinkers who redefine exploration. Living the mission and making the world a better place.
Thank you. I show these things. I say these things. I'm a National Geographic Explorer. That commercial won an Emmy. That I sit on the Wilderness Society's Governing Council. I'm the youngest member of the Sierra Club Foundation in history. I advise groups. I advise the President's White House agenda on connecting kids to the outdoors through the Centennial Initiative of the National Park Service, the Every Kid in the Park initiative. I say these things not to brag, not to say these are my titles, but these are the titles of the community. That my success is your success, and your success is our success. And to the students and those of us under the age of 30 in this room, know that if a kid who grew up in a tool shed in LA, in South Central LA, don't ever let anybody tell you that you are the leader of tomorrow. You are the leader of today. Because the United States is starting to look a lot different. The demographics of the United States are changing. There's a lot of states that are now minority majority. The state of California is a perfect example of that. In the state of New Jersey, the Latino population just broke into 18%, becoming the largest minority group in the state of New Jersey. The Hispanic purchasing power at a national scale in the U.S. is between 1.2 and 1.5 trillion with a T, dollars. The best and most effective way that people advocate and vote is through their pockets. Federal agencies have taken account for this, putting together initiatives like eKIP, the Centennial, youthgo.gov, where leaders can access jobs. The outdoor recreation industry is realizing that their market is changing. REI and the North Face, you'll see it through their publishing and through their philanthropy giving, that they're becoming more relevant. Their communication is becoming friendlier, easier to access, less so of the guy who's climbing the peak and more so of the family going outside for a day hike. Conservation and outdoor recreation are starting to become relative. Many of the national organizations have taken it on themselves to put together a study called Green 2.0 that talks about the lack of diversity in the outdoor recreation environmentalist fields and the need to address it. And land conservation and preservation, and this is where we come in. This is where your group comes in. Because national parks and wilderness monuments and all these places and state parks are great, and I advocate for them and I understand the value. But if we are to preserve a legacy that moves forward, it starts closer to home. And that's where you come in. And so I was asked to talk a little bit about what urban community engagement means. And so here are some of my tools for relevancy. And the first one is communication. But I don't want you to think about communication as we're going to put a brochure, we're going to put some talking points, we're going to put our mission upon this community. I want you to take communication one step further and stress the word listen, listen, listen. Because the community will tell you what it needs and what it wants. But we have to be available to listen. Meet the community where they are. We can build 1 million parks and plant 1 million trees, but kind of in that field of dreams methodology kind of doesn't apply. If you build it, they will not come. You have to build into that a community engagement program that is relevant, that represents the community, that speaks the language. And you need to meet them where they are. You need to extend your boundaries. Go to the carnicerias, go to the barbecue joints, go to Sunday church service. Meet the people where they are. We can't say we built it and they didn't come. If we are to survive as a movement, that is not an excuse we can use. And then make the connection between the issues. We know for a fact that communities with more parks and a strong community engagement program are able to increase health in a community and decrease violence. We know that. Those are facts. Through the Children of Nature Network, we built a research center and are starting to extend it more cohesively. So take advantage of that. It's free. It's one of the few research tools available to you for free. So the second point, engagement. Once you get them sparked up, once you get them rolling, don't just stop. You are not the best messenger for your community if you don't represent that community, right? Maybe you do, and you're part of the community, and that's great. You'll be the best messenger. But sometimes we get caught in this idea that I have to be the one out there. And I've caught myself. I'm guilty of this as we work at an international and national scale. The thing that I've realized is that the best messengers are the community themselves. Is the community themselves. Address the whole family. You can't just talk to one age sector. You got to talk to the whole family. And that means grandpa, grandma, crazy uncle, everybody in there. And present opportunities for action. If action means just taking a hike in your preserve or advocating for that preserve or learning or being a part of the program, that's a great opportunity. But you could take it another step forward. How many of you have ever heard of the Land Water Conservation Fund? All right. How many of you that have heard the Land Water Conservation Fund are under the age of 30? Raise your hand. Thank you. It's a term that's irrelevant. And this is my beef with the LWCF fund. It's getting constantly under attack and reduced. But the people that benefit the most from it, the communities who are benefiting and reaping the most benefits from it, don't even know about this fund. And this is where the empowerment piece comes in. This is where empowerment means we have done a great job at preserving and setting aside these places for future generations. But now we can't just worry about the trees and the birds and the rivers. That's great. We're doing a good job at it. There's more to be done, but we're getting there. Now it's time to tell the people narrative. The community benefits that are being impacted, the communities that are being impacted by funds like LWCF, by preserves like yourselves, by bills that just passed this past Monday, was it? The Senate approves the open space bill. We need to tell the stories of the people and the communities that are going to reap the benefits of this. And I think that's a bit of a paradigm shift for us because we've done such a good job at the land conservation ethic of it that it's time to talk about the people conservation ethic of it and the people value. Empowerment also means employment, making sure that your staff is representative. I see the young people clapping, right? You can't just talk about volunteer opportunities. You can't just talk about internships that end in a couple of months. You really have to drive towards sustainable long-term jobs. And it's not easy, I know. But there's ways and methods and samples, and you guys are leading the way forward. So that's my cue. So why do we do it? I believe there's universal truths to who we are as humans. We and Americans. We love food. So if you're thinking about like reaching a community, go to the barbecues, host a barbecue. Do that. Like there's no better way to bring community together than to share a meal. We love food. We love our family. We are in the pursuit of happiness. It's written in our declaration. That's who we are as people. Those are universal truths that bring anybody together. And on that, there's a perfect platform to bring the community together, and that's outdoors. That's nature. Because regardless of your political direction or who you apply to, there's one truth that we all know. We all love food, family, and getting outside. And that's why I do it. I do it for my family. This is a picture of my family in the backyard. And you might say to yourself, that's a black guy in there. Yes, that's my brother, Andrew Anderson. Because family to me has become more relative as I go on this journey of work and action. Because family to me means those who stand in action with you. So as you set out in your next 20 years of becoming relevant to an urban community, know that you are becoming it of my family, that we are becoming a part of a movement that is larger than ourselves. A movement that includes 50 of the first natural leaders to be ever trained on community organizing and outdoor recreation skills. And shortly after being named the National Geographic Explorer in 2011, in September, I got to meet Conrad Anker. Conrad Anker, for those of you who follow climbing, he just climbed Summit at Meru, and one of the most epic. He's like, I like to say, like the Michael Jordan of climbing, because this guy is legendary. So I meet him at this conference where I'm giving a keynote, and he comes up to me. Well, we're looking at a photo of the Grand Tetons together, and he comes right next to me. I didn't know who he was. I just didn't have a clue who this guy was at the time. And so we're just talking about the Grand Tetons, talking about my experience, talking about him and how he his times in the Grand. And then I tell him, one of these days, I want to make sure I climb that. He says, all right, I'm going in 3 weeks. You want to come with me? I said, sure, why the hell not, right? So in September 9th, 2011, I got to summit the Grand Teton. But what I want to stress about that was that Conrad and I come from two very different places and move in two very different paths forward. But we have this shared bond that if this guy that grew up in Yosemite Valley and this guy who grew up in South Central LA can come together and do something like climb a crazy mountain, there's more to that we can do together. And I also got to meet my wife, all right? So there was a list, and I was pleasantly surprised of films that you can check out. I think you guys put a list together of films recommended on conservation. There's a movie called Love in the Tetons. It's a movie about us. Because my wife, and I want to stress this, is my better 3/4, right? Yeah. Because she's a park ranger, Latina, from Texas, did her first internship in Alaska, just got published in her first co-author book, is leading the district office of the National Park Service in downtown LA as it become more urban and relevant. So she's her own rock star. And I got to meet her when she was a ranger at Grand Teton National Park. She pioneered a program called within the National Park Service, the National Park Service Academy. It takes young college students of diverse backgrounds and fast tracks them into employment opportunities within the federal government. So she's her own rock star, and I want to stress that. I am a lucky guy that I get to do this stuff, that I get to address you as I do. But I want to stress that my story is only one story and one voice of a movement that is out there. And that as one of the trainings that we do is telling your personal narrative, and telling your personal narrative for change and action. And I want to encourage you all to share that story, share that legacy, that moment that made you come to this room. It might be 50 years in the past, it might be 30 years in the making, might be 2 years since you had that moment. But share that personal story, because when you do that, you invite people into your life, you invite them into the movement that you represent and the values that you share. And there's more to us in common than there is in difference. So I'll leave you with this one quote, and it's one of my favorites, because once social change begins, it cannot be reversed. You cannot uneducate the person who has learned to read. You cannot humiliate the person who feels pride. You cannot oppress the people who are not afraid anymore. We have seen the future, and the future is ours. Cesar Chavez. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan, and thanks for coming to New Jersey. I know we're running a little bit behind. Please play our word cloud game. Answer the questions. Don't forget we have giveaways at the end, so stick around. You can get win a prize, and you also get a free one drink, beer, wine. Okay. Thank you. Go to your next session and have fun.